Welcome everybody. More Good Days acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Welcome everyone. I'm Sonia. I'm one of the support coaches here at More Good Days. And I'd just like to remind everyone that the session is recorded, and if you attend these sessions live that you agree to the rules that are in the invitation. The main thing is that if you want to ask questions, just type them in the chat. There is an anonymous function that you can tick so that you can keep your question completely anonymous and I'll ask the question for you. Today, I'm joined by one of our clinical psychologists, Luke Wright. Luke has 10 years of experience working in pain clinics across Sydney, and he's currently working at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital at the outpatient pain management clinic, as well as seeing patients for us here at More Good Days. He's compassionate, not judgmental, and really understanding. He includes mindfulness and acceptance-based strategies and helps people to live life to the fullest despite having chronic pain and illness and all of the adversity that comes with those sorts of challenges. We're so lucky to have him as one of our psychologists, and we're really pleased that he's able to join us here today to talk about managing stress and unhelpful thoughts, because let's face it, this time of year, who isn't stressed? It definitely tends to be a really stressful time of year for a lot of people. So we're going to have this session primarily on stress and managing those unhelpful thoughts that sometimes contribute to that stress. So welcome, Luke. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Very happy to be here.
Can we start off with just having a bit of an explanation of what is stress?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, stress is one of these things that I think everyone has experienced at some point in our lives, really. And essentially what stress is it's, I guess, our body and our nervous system's quite normal reaction to anything that it perceives as being, I guess, a bit of a threat. So this can be anything from internal threats, such as, maybe pain itself, or particular emotions that we might be experiencing. And of course, we have, I guess, external threats. So, maybe in the past, this would have been something like, is that lion in the jungle going to sort of leap out at me? And now it tends to be around, well, I've got Christmas coming up and, I've got all these people to potentially talk to, or, maybe I've got lots of bills to pay, or finances are sort of not so great at the moment. So all these are what we consider to be stressors. So really anything, that our minds perceive as even problems at the end of the day. And so look, just a little bit of information on stress though. So although it's a normal reaction, I guess prolonged levels of stress, and maybe when it goes on for a little bit too long and it becomes quite chronic, can have actually a bit of a detrimental impact on, I guess, our bodies. So levels of stress hormones might be quite raised, for example. And so we might start to experience some difficulties with, say, winding down, being able to relax at all, being able to sleep. We might sort of start to feel like our conversation goes, our concentration goes a little bit hard to manage that. And our bodies might sort of feel quite energized and like we're almost kind of looking for threats sometimes. So I myself sort of often experience stress as a bit of a difficulty in concentration and I guess feeling quite irritable or a bit over-energized as well. So that's basically what stress is in a nutshell.
Definitely sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that we can do about stress? So that's how can we sort of reduce the stresses that come with Christmas or with family or all of those kinds of things that cause us?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, luckily there are a bunch of things that we can do to help manage our stress, knowing full well that I guess there are lots of stresses that we're not going to be able to completely avoid. And in fact, completely trying to avoid stress often isn't the best solution to actually managing stress. So, like, for example, Christmas is often a really difficult time for people. We might be forced in a way to interact with people a bit more, and it can actually be an exceptionally lonely experience for a lot of people. Things can tend to get, I guess, a lot busier as well. It gets a bit hotter. Right. But thankfully, there are things that we can do. One of the things that we sort of go through, or I go through with a lot of clients, is actually things called mindfulness techniques. And what these can do is they sort of enable a sense of relaxation. They can communicate to our nervous system that we're actually safe at the moment, even if, for example, there is pain that's coming up for us. They can also help to, I guess, refocus our attention or keep our attention grounded so that we're a little bit less inclined to spend large amount of time, say, ruminating on different thoughts. And I guess just spending a little bit more time actually experiencing things that are going on in our environment as opposed to just being stuck in our head. We've got other techniques, like there's something called progressive muscle relaxation, which I would highly recommend that people sort of give it a go. I think there is actually something on the app there. So research has actually shown that we tend to experience a lot of stress as tension in our bodies. And sometimes this tension can then actually increase our stress in this almost kind of like this negative feedback cycle that goes on. So what progressive muscle relaxation really helps us do is, I guess, sort of let go of some of that tension within our bodies. And we can do that entirely ourselves, which is quite convenient. So you've got other things too. You've got physical activity. And look, this is a big one. Often it's something it is difficult with chronic pain, but research has shown that actually it can lead to improvements in things like the severity of our pain, our physical functioning, and as well as things like our psychological well-being as well. And there's a few other things here too. We might learn how to sort of manage our time a little bit better and to prioritize things. So having lists of things, having different ways of managing what we're doing throughout the day. If you're anything like me, your head can sometimes be going this way and that, particularly when it comes to, I guess, the Christmas period, everything gets quite hectic. So helping to manage some of that can be quite helpful. And look, the last few things are things like, looking after our emotional self, right? So engaging in fun activities, even if that's not always easy to do, creative pursuits, making sure that we're actually, we're sort of going out and connecting socially as much as we can. And of course, things like journaling. So journaling is often a really important part of therapy, and it's something that I always encourage my clients to do, just to explore how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, how I'm behaving, and what's actually going on for me at the moment. And that can be quite helpful in managing some of our stress as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. What about if you, so I'm going to throw one at you that I've just thought of here that we do sometimes get asked, and I didn't warn you of. Some people really struggle with journaling, to get started on journaling. Everybody sort of says, oh, you should journal, but then you sit there down with your pen and paper and then everything just goes blank. Have you got any tips for getting started in journaling?
So something that I would really recommend is there's something called a thought record that I really like to give my clients. And look, it really likes to break down difficult situations into a few different components. And so what it looks like is we have a little bit of room to, say, just describe what that situation was. It might have been an interaction. It might have been pain itself, right? A little bit about what might have been going through our heads. So maybe some of the thoughts that we might have been having. And there's a little bit about our emotions. So what did that feel like for us? And then a little bit about maybe how we behaved in that situation, right? So that's an example of what journaling might actually look like. Some people, like myself, like I'm the type of person where if I don't keep it structured, I'll just be writing a huge essay, right? And I don't find that particularly helpful for me. So I tend to like this more structured approach to, okay, what was going on for me in that moment, right? And then being able to actually look back at that and decide, okay, like, I was having these thoughts there or these emotions there, or I behaved in a way that wasn't that helpful there, right? But other people, for example, it's just about putting pen to paper and just writing how I might be feeling at a given point in time, and that is completely okay as well. So getting a book out, just writing something down about a situation that I might have struggled with, and you can use some of that structure if you need it.
Great, thank you. I know that is a question we get asked a lot.
Yeah,
so
I can imagine.
just as soon as you said journaling, I went, oh yes, I better remember to ask that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you mentioned having various thoughts. Can you sort of go over some common unhelpful thoughts that people who have chronic pain regularly have, and how they can help manage those?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we're always going to get a bunch of unhelpful thoughts when we're in pain, and I guess when we're in a state of stress as well. And, what I like to say to my clients is that often this is actually it's a very, very normal experience, actually. So a lot of what our head tries to do when we're in pain is it actually tries to look out for threat, and it tries to keep us safe as much as possible, right? So coming into that, I guess part of what we need to do with some of our thoughts is actually be a little bit self-compassionate as well. Right, there's nothing actually wrong with having some of these thoughts. They might not necessarily be helpful, but they're certainly quite normal in a lot of ways, right? So I guess it's all about how do we manage them? How do we make sure that we're the ones calling the shots and not necessarily some of these thoughts, right? So look, just some examples of this. My favorite, I loved categorizing thoughts, for example. So they call this catastrophization, which I don't actually think is a proper word, but look, we've used it.
Sounds good.
It sounds good, doesn't it? Look, and this is one of those ones where I don't know if people have had that experience. I'm sure people have, where it's like something happens and our mind just makes an absolute mountain out of a molehill, right? It's like this, maybe something that sort of happened and all of a sudden it blows into this huge catastrophe in our heads, right? And then what often ends up happening is that, we sort of go through and actually the thing that our mind was telling us was going to happen, it just did it, right? Or maybe to a much less extent than what we actually thought it was going to, right? So our minds tend to love doing that because, again, what's most important for our minds is actually just keeping us safe. Right, so they're going to be throwing all these, catastrophes at us quite a bit. So look, at a bit of
something I was guilty of. That's for sure.
Yeah,
something would happen to flare my fibro up, and I'd be absolutely convinced that this is it. I'm going to be in this much pain for forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's often a common one that I hear is that, this is never going to go away. I'm never going to get better. Things are never going to get back to to normal in my life, or any semblance of normal, right? So that's often a good example of a catastrophic thought that we might have. And look, some other ones too. I find that personalization comes up quite a bit, and so that can be blaming ourselves for pain, even sometimes. Like it's funny how sometimes we can blame ourselves for things that are in a lot of ways completely outside of our control, right? We might wake up in pain and we're already saying to ourselves, what did I do wrong? Right, this was my fault. This was because of X or Y, right? And we just tend to blame ourselves. And my other, the other one that I tend to find comes up quite a bit is what I call shoulding and musting, right? And what this looks like is I should be able to do this. I must be able to do that, right? So we set these super high expectations on ourselves, right? Even to the point where, we might go through some kind of injury. We might come down with, fibromyalgia or some type of illness, right? And all of a sudden our heads are still expecting that we've got to do everything that we used to do, right? So we set these expectations so high, and then at the end of the day, we might actually overdo things and then, beat ourselves up, and it ends up being there's a lot of suffering that goes on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that that's something that chatting with the other coaches, it's if you've got chronic back pain, for example, and it flares up, it's this convinced that you did something to make this pain be worse, and it's a really common thing. We hear it a lot as coaches, and I'm sure you hear it all the time as a psychologist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So what do we actually do about these unhelpful thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, luckily there's a few ways that we can actually manage some of these unhelpful thoughts. So the first thing that we can do is, and look, none of these things are what I would call easy. This is something that, we might need to sort of go through a lot of self-development, using things like the app, for example, engaging with a psychologist if we're struggling or need that extra support. But one of the first things that we might do is that it's something called cognitive restructuring, which I know sounds all very, scientific, but that's basically learning how to think from a different perspective, right? Or really taking a bit of a scientific lens to some of our thoughts. Right. So we have what's called reframing our thoughts. For example, basically shifting our thoughts into a different perspective. So what this might involve is maybe asking ourselves some questions on, like, What are some other ways I might actually view the situation? What am I assuming? Or what would even a friend say in this situation? So what that might look like in the context of pain is really like, I'm having a bad pain day, right? Everything is just awful at the moment. Nothing is going to get back to normal. What would a friend say in this situation? What is a different way of looking at this, right? This pain is bad at the moment. And at the same time, there might be some small things that I can do, right? And I know that this is likely, this pain flare-up is likely to subside eventually, right? And so the other way that we might, I guess, sort of engage in a bit of cognitive restructuring is something called cognitive challenging. And that's where we sort of look at, what's the evidence for some of this thought, right? This is a particularly good one when we might be engaging in a lot of catastrophizing, right? What's actually evidence to say that this is likely to happen? And what are some of the more likely things that are likely to happen in this situation, right? As opposed to going to this extreme and just following that catastrophe down the rabbit hole, what is actually something that is a little bit more likely, right? Or a little bit more balanced there. And look, just some other ways in which we might actually manage some of our thoughts are, like I said before, things like journaling can be quite helpful. So learning what our cycles are or what thoughts are likely to come up for us. Something that's also quite important is also what we call self-compassion and having some affirmations for ourselves. So often one of the things that we might experience when we're in pain is a lot of self-criticism. So slowly learning how to apply a sense of, affirmations or self-compassion to ourselves in these moments, maybe even having, I guess, a spot in a diary where you can write some of these down and actually come back to them. It's like some positive coping statements as well, like I can get through this. I know that this will pass. This is painful at the moment, and there are still things that I might be able to do, right, to help manage some of this.
Yeah.
And just briefly, I won't go into it in too much detail, but there's another way of managing some of our thoughts too that's based on some mindfulness principles. And that's really about sort of noticing some of these thoughts that might be coming up for us, and then maybe sort of grounding ourselves and refocusing our attention back on things that might be a little bit more important, letting some of those thoughts go.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I remember one of the, I don't remember which particular psychologist it was that said to me, but changing your shoulds to coulds. I found that one really powerful when I was in the early stages of my pain journey. It was like, I should be doing the dishes. I should be doing all of these things. And I could be doing the dishes. It sort of still acknowledges that the dishes need to be done.
Yeah.
But it makes it a bit more of a choice rather than a demand from myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
yeah.
All right. Have you got any sort of specific sort of help, sort of ideas for people who do struggle with Christmas interactions? So a lot of people have family that are a bit difficult and causes them stress, or alternatively, they don't have any family around them and it's a really lonely time of year for them. Have you got some tips to help with the thoughts that come up around those two situations?
Yeah. I think, look, one of the most important things is actually just to pace yourself and to be self-compassionate no matter what is going on for you throughout this time. I think whether we have family around us or we don't, it's almost always a difficult time. And I guess actually just leaving that expectation behind that this has got to be a positive experience. At least for me, one of the most difficult things about Christmas is actually the idea that this is just supposed to be a lovely, great experience. And, I'm supposed to be having so much fun and eating all this food. And do you know what I mean? But it's not actually something that for a lot of people, or dare I say even most people, is actually like that. It's busy, it's hot. I have to come into contact with lots of people that, particularly if I'm struggling with something like pain, people are going to be asking me a lot of really difficult questions. So making sure that, if anything, we're practicing a bit of self-compassion, not necessarily setting that expectation that things have got to be great at the moment, right? Yeah. And maybe even having a little bit of a response or something that I can say to people if they start asking me about how I'm going or some of my pain.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to try and, especially people with children, try and make Christmas absolutely perfect for their kids. And I guess that's something that I suppose we can look back at what we enjoyed ourselves as kids, and it was usually the interactions, at least for me anyway. It was the interactions with people, and the sitting down and reading a book with my grandma, and the book that I'd just gotten unwrapped, and then she sat there and read them with me. So it doesn't need to be high energy things. And that, I think that's something that's important to remember, that it's the connection, rather than the amount of energy that you use.
Yeah, absolutely. You're really just doing what you can, right? Even if that is just connecting in the simplest way possible.
Yeah. I guess letting go of perfection is a big problem for a lot of people. I know that's something that I'm super guilty of. Everything's going to be just so, and if it's not just so, it's not okay. But learned to let go of a lot of that. So we're running on time, which is incredible for me. I usually end up talking too much. So if anybody wants to book with you, I just sort of need to start with this. Unfortunately, is only for Australian residents. But what sort of availabilities do you have coming up in the new or in the new year?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm doing telehealth. It's mostly on the sort of Fridays and a little bit on the Wednesdays at the moment. So basically, I guess halfway into January, I've got some availability at the moment to see people.
Yeah, wonderful. And if anybody does want to book in with Luke, you can check out the Engage page on the app, or you can email us hello@moregooddays.com.au, and we can help you book in an appointment with Luke. For Australian citizens, you can offset the cost of your psychology session with what's called a mental health treatment plan, and that's eligible for all of our psychologists, whether it's Luke or the other psychologists that we have. Come the new year, if you've used up all of this year's, as of the 1st of January, you will be eligible for a new one. So if you see your GP, ask them for a mental health treatment plan. That can offset the cost of the psychology appointments. You can get 10 sessions a year from Medicare. And we've got a bit of content in the app. So chapter 3 is all about lowering the pain dial, and chapter 5 is breaking the stress anxiety cycle. And because we do know that stress and anxiety and pain are all sort of that lovely whirlwind of as you said, negative feedback loops. And there's quite a few mindfulness practices in the library. The progressive muscle relaxation that Luke mentioned, it can be found in the library as well. And we've got a couple of blogs on our website that are also about stress and the effects that has on the body, and how you can use meditation for pain. We'll include those in the email that goes after this. And another thing that a lot of people really find helpful, especially this time of year, is what we call our not to do list. So we usually have a big long list of things we want to get done, and having a list of things that you acknowledge that need to be done, but that you are not going to do right now, can be a really helpful thing to help manage your stress. And there is a guide on how to do that in the library as well. And yes, thank you very much for joining us, Luke. It was really, really helpful. I hope everybody who attended live enjoyed it, and anyone who is watching the recording, I hope it helps reduce your stress a little bit, and that you have a wonderful festive season. Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, and all the best for this difficult season of life. If you are here for the first time, we're welcome. We're very glad to have you. Feel free to contact your coach if you've got any questions regarding this. And again, if you want to book in with Luke, please be in contact with us. He'll be very happy to help you. Thank you very much, Luke.
Thanks for having me.